Mayor West hasn't slept at home for 3 nights.
Kermit the Frog?
Somebody talked! No one is safe! I'm getting out of here! Yay!
The Muppets, the iconic franchise that has been blessing our society with entertainment for the last 70 years through their iconic TV shows and movies. We should all be so goddamn grateful that we are alive at a time that we get to enjoy the Muppets as much as we do. Now, if there is one thing you should know about me, it's that I absolutely adore the Muppets. I don't really know how to explain my love for them other than the fact that they mean the world to me. I was introduced to them with the 2011 Muppet movie and instantly fell in love with them, so it has genuinely broken my heart into a million little pieces to witness the way that the degenerates at Disney have treated the Muppets. And if you ask me, Michael Mouse has a lot to answer for. So with the news that the Muppets are being thrown a lifeline, with the new Muppet projects that have been released and that are set to be releasing over the next couple years, I thought it would be a good idea to go through how we got to this point. How have Disney continued to screw over the Muppet franchise? Why are Muppet fans so angry at Disney? And will the future Muppet projects be able to save the Muppets from the prison that Disney has trapped them in?
Agreed, Peter.
Now, before I start to explain the lore of the Muppets, I just want to say that I know people get really defensive about this franchise, and I 100% understand why, right? Like, I love them, I get it. So if I get any of these facts wrong whatsoever, please feel free to correct me in the comments. I tried my best, right? So like, please don't kill me if I get anything wrong. Anyway, let's get into it. The Muppets were created by the iconic Jim Henson. Now, Jim Henson is responsible for so many iconic, culturally impactful projects, including Sesame Street, Fraggle Rock, and of course the Muppets. However, Henson would get his start within the puppetry industry with his friend Russell Wall in 1954. The two created their first puppet known as Perry the French Rat and got a slot on their local TV show performing with this puppet. However, while only being on this TV show for about 3 weeks, Henson was offered a job as a puppeteer for the TV studio WRC TV for their show Afternoon with Inga. Now, just a year later in 1955, Henson was offered his own TV show that went on to become Sam and Friends. Now, Sam and Friends was basically 2 5-minute shorts that would air after the Daily News had ended. Sam and Friends involved puppets lip-syncing to songs or comedy scenes. Something really sweet about Sam and Friends as well was the fact that this is actually where Jim Henson met his wife, as she was one of the other puppeteers on the show. Now, little did Jim Henson know that not only was this show incredibly important to his lore and his career, but it was incredibly important to pop culture. And you may be wondering why that is, and that, my good friend, is because this is where Kermit the Frog had his debut. During this time, Jim Henson began to introduce and incorporate new ways of puppeteering. For example, he changed the way that the puppets traditionally looked and moved around, which gave the puppets a more realistic feel to them than puppets had had before this. He reinvented the puppet game, if you will. In the late 50s, alongside Sam and Friends, Henson decided to use his puppets for commercials under his company Muppets Inc. During this time, Henson would begin to get nationwide attention as a result of his character, probably one of the most underrated, underappreciated Muppets of all time, my personal favourite Muppet, Rolf the Dog. And Rolf the Dog began to gain so much attention due to the fact that he was in a lot of these commercials. The nationwide attention that Henson began to get thanks to the icon that is Rolf resulted in him being invited onto different nationwide TV shows such as the Jimmy Dean Show and the Ed Sullivan Show. While this was happening, Jim Henson made one of the most iconic moves in cinematic history. That was because he hired both Jerry Gill and Frank Oz to perform alongside him. These two are very iconic within the Muppet world. Jerry Gill was the head writer for the Muppets for 4 decades, and Frank Oz is one of the most iconic puppeteers of all time. He created and performed so many iconic characters within the Jim Henson cinematic universe, if you will. Some of these characters include, but are not limited to, Miss Piggy, Fozzie Bear, Animal, Bert, Grover, and the Cookie Monster. Like, name a more iconic list of characters, you just cannot. Also, fun fact, now I actually learnt this like really late into my life, right? I'm not really a Star Wars guy, so you know, don't like crucify me. The only Star Wars I've ever seen is Family Guy Star Wars. But Frank Oz actually performs as Yoda in Star Wars as well. In 1969, Henson would get his real big break, as this is the year Sesame Street was created. Sesame Street, which by the way is still on to this very day, was created with the intention that it would be an educational show for children. The show introduced so many iconic characters to our society, such as the Cookie Monster, Grover, Bert, Ernie, Big Bird, Oscar the Grouch, and many, many more. I know that you're probably screaming and punching your screen right now asking me why Elmo was not included in that list, and that is because Elmo wasn't actually introduced until 1980. Kermit the Frog was the only character from Sam and Friends to ever visit Sesame Street and would often make appearances, as well well as this, Rolf the dog would also often show up in Sesame Street every now and again to, like, you know, wind them up and have some little giggles with them. Although you could argue that Sesame Street is, to be honest, I would probably say is like the most iconic children's TV show to ever exist. Jim Henson was a bit hesitant to go forward with it, as he didn't want to be seen as just a children's entertainer. However, he would go on to prove that that was not true at all, and that is not what he would be remembered as. There's something that I absolutely admire about Jim Henson in regards to this, is the fact that he not only changed puppeteering in the way that the puppets would move and look, but he also changed the way that puppets were seen and perceived by the public. Now, before Jim Henson, puppets were usually seen as something to entertain children rather than something that could be enjoyed by adults. However, Jim Henson set out to dismantle this belief. He believed that puppets could be enjoyed by both children and adults, and that they could be for everyone. However, when he tried to pitch the idea of creating a version of Sesame Street that would be more for adults, he was made to feel like a goddamn fool, as the studios seen puppets as children's entertainment. You know, they just didn't know a good idea when it slapped them across the face. But it's crazy to think that people really did push back on this idea that puppets could be for everyone and not just for children, because of how successful the Muppets went on to be. But we'll get ahead of ourselves here, we will get to that. Anyway, let's continue. However, Henson did get a chance to try and show that puppets could be for adults, as he was given the chance to have a slot on Saturday Night Live in which he hoped to show that puppets could be incorporated into shows intended for a more grown-up audience. However, this didn't go the way that Henson and Saturday Night Live probably would have liked, with some of the Saturday Night Live cast members being very angry and salty about the fact that the puppets were sharing the stage with them, or in other words, they were pissed off that the puppets were funnier than they were. However, when all hope was lost for this idea that puppets could be for everyone, Henson was given a lifeline, as he was given the green light to create a show intended for a more mature audience with his puppets, and this, ladies and gentlemen, is where the Muppet Show came to be. Kermit, of course, was selected by Henson to be the main character and the host of this show, and they introduced some of the most recognisable characters within pop culture, including Miss Piggy, Fozzie Bear, Gonzo, and Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem, as well as introducing some of the most iconic characters known to mankind. The show also introduced new ways of puppeteering, including the introduction of raised platforms so that the puppeteers could be hidden more, and so that the Muppets could move around more smoothly. Now, just like Sesame Street, the Muppet Show would also feature celebrity guests who would appear in sketches with the Muppets. Some celebrity guests that were featured on the Muppet Show include Elton John, Steve Martin, Liza Minnelli, and many, many more. Now, celebrity guests is a theme with Henson projects, as every Muppet movie has had a variety of celebrity guest stars as well. It's so wholesome that celebrities that appear in these projects always have such a fun time and genuinely are so honoured to share the stage with the Muppets, unlike those goddamn hools at Saturday Night Live who couldn't understand that the Muppets were so iconic.
Little idiots! Idiots!
And I also love as well, right, just because I don't really know where to put this in, but like, I love the fact that the Muppets within society are just treated like genuine celebrities, like they're treated like genuine people, and it's so funny. And celebrities will genuinely treat the Muppets like they are just fellow celebrities. Like, I love it so much. But anyway, let's continue. Now, the Muppet Show ran from 1974 until 1981, and with the success of the Muppet Show, it gave Henson the opportunity to create a movie with the Muppet characters, and this, of course, was the Muppet movie. The movie began filming in July 1978, and the world was blessed when it was released in June 1979. The movie was a huge success and was praised by Muppet fans as well as critics. The budget for this movie was around $8 million, and at the box office it managed to gain $65.2 million. The movie was also the most successful puppet movie until 2011, when the Muppets were dethroned by themselves, with the Muppet movie that was released in 2011 now holding this title. Fans absolutely adored this movie, with it having an 88% score on Rotten Tomatoes and an 89% Rotten Tomatoes scores by reviewers, because as we all know, this is the best and most accurate way to see if a piece of media is good or not. The 1979 Muppet movie was nominated for a bunch of awards and managed to win 2 very iconic awards. It won a Saturn Award for Best Fantasy Film, and it won a Grammy for Best Album for Children. However, I think the biggest impact that the movie had on our society was the fact that it kicked off the beginning of the Muppet movies. Since this movie was released in 1979, there have been a total of 13 different Muppet movies, and I'll touch on most of these as we go through the rest of the video. After the success of the 1979 Muppet movie, the Jim Henson Company released 2 other major Muppet movies. The first of these being The Great Muppet Caper, which was released in 1981, and The Muppets Take Manhattan, which was released in 1984. The Great Muppet Caper was released in 1981, making $31.2 million at the box office with a budget of $14 million. However, it wasn't as successful as the movie before it. The Muppets Take Manhattan was released after this in 1984 with a budget of only $8 million. The movie managed to make $25.5 million at the box office. Again, it made less than both of the movies before it. However, However, despite the fact that the two movies made less than the 1979 movie, were both still incredibly successful at the box office. As well as this, both movies received a great deal of praise from both critics and fans alike, with The Great Muppet Caper having a 78% rating from both critics and fans on Rotten Tomato, and The Muppets Take Manhattan having 85% from critics and 76% from fans on Rotten Tomato. Now, after the release of The Muppets Take Manhattan, there wouldn't be another Muppet movie until The Muppets Christmas Carol in 1992. However, I'm going to put a pin in that just now, and we will touch on this movie a little bit later in the video. Now, in between the release of Muppets Take Manhattan and The Muppets Christmas Carol in 1992, Jim Henson wanted to work on a project that would incorporate the Muppets in the concept of 3D. Now, Henson partnered with Disney in order to create this and filmed a short 3D movie which incorporated the Muppets on the Disney Studio soundstage in January of 1990. This was written by Bill Prady and was directed by Henson himself. Now, in the later half of the 80s, Henson and Disney had begun their partnership. However, it was officially announced to the public in August 1989 that Disney and Henson had reached a quote, an agreement in principle for Disney to acquire the Henson Company, and it was also announced that there would be a Muppet attraction added to the Disney park in MGM Studios, which is now referred to as Hollywood Studios. Now, this attraction was set to debut in May of 1990. However, tragically, Jim Henson passed away on May 16th, 1990. This tragedy absolutely broke the hearts of everyone around the world, people who were or who had ever been fans of any of Henson's projects and creations. His movies and shows were integral parts of most people's adolescence, and his passing was an absolute loss for the world. The 3D Muppet attraction was delayed and officially opened on May 16th, 1991 to honour Jim Henson on the 1-year anniversary of his passing. This attraction was debuted entitled Muppet Vision 3D. However, Henson's death resulted in the deal with Disney falling through, as the Jim Henson Company was handed over to Henson's children, who stopped the deal with Disney going through.
I want a skull.
Okay, well, I can draw Kermit the Frog. How about a nice Kermit the Frog?
No, I want a skull.
Okay, well, I'm gonna go ahead and do Kermit the Frog.
Before his passing in 1990, Jim Henson had been negotiating with Disney for Disney to take over the Jim Henson Company, and as a result, the two had built up a very good relationship that was leading to this deal taking place. However, the deal was crushed with Henson's death in 1990, as the company was handed over to his children, who did not want to go forward with the deal with Disney. Despite this, however, the Jim Henson Company, at the hands of his children, would continue on with the partnership with Disney, producing two very iconic movies during the early 1990s. The first of these being The Muppets Christmas Carol. Released in 1992 and with a budget of $12 million, the movie managed to make $27.2 million at the box office and was also loved by critics and fans alike. The movie sits with a 78% rating from critics and an 86% rating from fans on Rotten Tomatoes. This movie is extremely important within Muppets history, as it was the first Muppet project to be produced after Henson's passing, and the success of this movie highlighted the fact that Henson's legacy could live on and that the Muppets could continue on bringing laughter and hope to society despite the fact that Henson was no longer there. The second of these movies to be released during the early 1990s in partnership with Disney was The Muppets Treasure Island. Released in 1996, the movie had a budget of $5 million and managed to make $47.2 million at the box office, meaning that at the time of its release, this was one of the most successful Muppet movies to date, only being beaten by the original Muppet movie. The movie was also beloved by critics and fans alike, just like The Muppets Christmas Carol was, with the movie having an 80% rating from critics and a 77% rating from fans on Rotten Tomatoes. In the late 1990s, the Jim Henson Company would partner with Columbia Pictures instead of Disney to produce Muppets from Space. The movie was released in 1999, and with a budget of $24 million, it was only able to make $22.3 million at the box office, meaning that the movie actually lost $2 million at the box office and wasn't able to make back its original budget, meaning that this was unfortunately the Muppets flop era. On Rotten Tomatoes, the movie has a 61% rating from critics and a 58% rating from fans, highlighting the fact that it wasn't just a box office failure but also a critical failure. However, despite this movie has continued on to be one of the fan favourite Muppet movies, and I know that might sound a bit contradictory because of the fact that it does have a 58% rating from fans on Rotten Tomatoes, right? But if you rate this movie low on your Muppet ratings, the Muppet fans will skin you alive. They absolutely love this movie. I actually was really shocked to find out that it didn't make its budget back, and the fact that it was poorly received by critics and stuff. Like, I genuinely had no idea. I was shocked to my core when I found that out. However, Muppets from Space marked the beginning of the Muppets flop era. Now, during the late 1990s and early 2000s, the Jim Henson Company began to struggle financially, and as a result, they would officially allow for Disney to purchase both the Muppets and Bed in the Big Blue House from the Jim Henson Company in 2004. Now, because the Jim Henson Company and Disney had been negotiating since the late 80s at this point for Disney to acquire the Muppets, you would think that Disney would be happy with this decision, as I mentioned, this deal had been in the card for a very long time, and with the release of The Muppets Wizard of Oz in 2005, it seemed as though this would have been the case. However, this deal was done under Michael Eisner, who left his leadership role with Disney in 2000 2005 when The Muppets Wizard of Oz was released, and the leadership role within Disney was taken over by Bob Iger, our goddamn enemy. I hate this man. No, I'm kidding on, hate's a strong word, but I very strongly dislike him for what he's done to my Muppets. I will never forgive him for what he done to them. Now, it seemed from the outside that Iger didn't seem to understand the magic and the potential that the Muppets truly possessed the way that Michael Eisner did, as he wasn't there when this deal was created, so he didn't really want the Muppets. It was Michael Eisner that wanted them, not Bob Iger. And the fact that the Muppets were in what I would consider to be their flop era probably didn't help with Iger's views on them. Now, as I mentioned before, Muppets from Space, which to be fair wasn't released under Disney but was still the Muppets, so it kind of gave an idea of how the Muppets were going to do commercially and stuff, was a commercial and critical failure. The Muppets Wizard of Oz didn't do much better. In fact, it done significantly worse than Muppets from Space, with it also being a critical and commercial flop. It is actually one of the lowest rated Muppet projects on Rotten Tomatoes, with a 30% rating from critics and a 36% rating from fans. It is often considered to be one of the worst Muppet movies and one of the worst Wizard of Oz adaptations, which, just a side note, is absolutely insane to me, because a Muppets Wizard of Oz in theory should work so well, and I think that if they were to redo it, it would be so amazing. And I honestly wish that they could and would redo this movie, because I think it would be genuinely so iconic. It was just not executed right whatsoever, so it is a real shame. But I do think that the failure of the last two major Muppet projects, which were Muppets from Space and Muppets Wizard of Oz, probably didn't give Bob Iger any hope that the Muppet franchise was going to be profitable. So after the release of the Muppets Wizard of Oz in 2005, the Muppets, for the first time since they blessed the world with their introduction, were essentially shelved and deemed to be irrelevant. However, Iger wasn't completely neglectful of the Muppets, especially in the early 2010s, with Disney releasing 3 main Muppet projects between 2011 and 2016. Those, of course, being The Muppets, released in 2011, Muppets Most Wanted in 2014, and of course the Muppets TV show, which was released between 2015 and 2016. I think in order to fully understand how we've gotten to the point we're at right now with the Muppets and Disney and the mistreatment of the Muppets from Disney, we have to look at these projects individually and really go in depth into the tone that they set for the Muppets and if they were financially and commercially successful. We'll start with the movie that kicked off the Muppet Renaissance, if you will, that being The Muppets, which was released in 2011. This project was announced back in 2008, with Jason Segel and Nicholas Stoller being attached as writers. They managed to bring back many of the original Muppet performers for this project, including Dave Goelz and Steve Whitmire. However, many decided not to participate in this, including the legendary Frank Oz, who famously performed as Miss Piggy and Fozzie Bear, as well as many others. As a result of this, his characters were performed by Eric Jacobson. Ozzy's characters had actually been passed down to Jacobson since the early 1990s, so it wasn't a complete surprise that Oz didn't want to participate in this, since Jacobson had been performing as these characters since the 1990s. When asked about participating in this Muppet project, Oz described the movie as sweet but too safe. He also alluded to the fact that Disney were not the nicest company to work with, which actually seems to be the case for a lot of people within the Muppet cinematic universe, but we'll get to that when we get to it, don't worry. But it's just interesting that Frank Oz did say this. Now, this movie was incredibly important for the Muppets during this time, as it served as the jumping off point for the Muppets getting back together and for them to continue on with different projects after this movie. And it also served as a way to introduce the new Muppet character Walter, who was a super fan of the Muppets who ultimately helped to save them. The movie was officially released on November 23rd, 2011, and the world was blessed with the reintroduction of the Muppets. The movie was a huge success at the box office, gaining a total of $171.8 million at the box office with a budget of only $45 million. The movie was not only a success, but also helped to establish the Muppet franchise as an important one within society, introducing them to a whole new generation of people, including children and even adults who weren't around for the movies or the shows when they were grown up. It also helped to reintroduce them to people who did grow up with them and who were also fans of them. Now, the movie was praised by critics and audiences alike, and the movie managed to capture not only the humour but the heart of the Muppets. However, one of the biggest strengths of the movie was in fact the musical numbers within it. It's no secret that all Muppet movies have a variety of different musical numbers, and all of them are iconic, from Rainbow Connections to Moving Right Along to Together Again. There are so many iconic Muppet musical numbers throughout all of their movies. However, I'm not even joking or trying to be funny when I say this. This movie has some of the greatest songs in cinema. The entire soundtrack is so much fun and it is genuinely so iconic, and I genuinely could pick out any song from the soundtrack to demonstrate how iconic it truly is. However, I'm going to go with the main song of this movie, the song that shook and continues to shake everyone to their goddamn cores, that of course being Man or Muppet. This song, this masterpiece, showcases the pain that both Walter and Gary are going through as they try to understand who they really are. It is so goddamn powerful. Now, the song went on to win Best Original Song at the goddamn Oscars, the Academy Awards. The song also went on to have a huge influence and impact on internet culture, with it often being used as a meme or a think piece on social media. Now, due to the success of this movie, Disney gave them the green light to go forward with another Muppet movie, and so the Muppet Renaissance began. We were blessed with the second of the new wave of Muppet movies in the form of Muppets Most Wanted, which was released on March 21st, 2014. This movie, although just as iconic as the last one, wasn't as successful. This movie made only $80 million at the box office with a budget of $50 million, so not terrible at all. Like, it managed to make its budget back, but it was not as successful. The critics and viewers had mixed reviews of it as well, with people agreeing that the first movie was better. However, despite this, Disney weren't completely done with the Muppets just yet. They gave what I would say was the last big chance that they've given to the Muppets in the 2010s with a TV show that was appropriately titled The Muppets, which aired between 2015 and 2016. The show put the Muppets into a TV set. However, instead of just rebooting the Muppet Show, which is absolutely what they should have done, by the way, and I think what's happened in recent times, which don't worry, we will get to that, kind of highlights that they probably should have just done that. They decided to jump on the trend of the mockumentary style TV shows to create what I can only describe as a hybrid between The Office and the Muppets. The show focused on Miss Piggy and our new talk show, with the other Muppet characters being integrated as workers on our show. Each episode would basically follow Miss Piggy causing a riot or whatever wacky disruption the show was facing that day, with there being a variety of different celebrity guests, just like the original Muppet Show had. The series strayed away from the more wholesome, family-friendly vibe of the first two movies that came before it and chose to adopt a more mature vibe. For example, one of the main plotlines throughout the season was the fact that Miss Piggy and Kermit the Frog had broken up and Kermit decided to date a younger pig, and how Miss Piggy would basically get quite jealous about this. It is also important to note, however, that the Muppets were more targeted at adults rather than children. As we discussed earlier in the video, that is what Jim Henson set out to do with the Muppet characters. He didn't want it to be for children, he wanted it to be more for adults, which is why the ABC show actually stays more true to the original Muppet characters and the original Muppet Show than the movies did. But, you know, that's just, you know, we'll get to that as well, because I will going to kind of expand on that point a little bit. I just thought it was important to put in here. Also, just a side note to this, during this time to promote the show, they treated Miss Piggy and Kermit the Frog breaking up like genuine global news and would have them go into talk shows talk about it, and it was genuinely so iconic. I loved this era. However, the show received very mixed reviews. The production behind the show was very messy, with there being a huge change in the team behind the season halfway through its production, which meant that the second half of the season was written by someone completely different to the first half, meaning that the tone was completely different as well. And as a result, one of the big critiques of the show was the fact that the first half and the second half were completely different and felt very different to each other, with many actually saying that they preferred the second half of the season to the first half. As well as this, one of the other big critiques of the show was the portrayal of Kermit the Frog, specifically the mischaracterization of Kermit the Frog. And the mischaracterization of Kermit the Frog actually angered Steve Whitmire, who had been performing as Kermit since the early 1990s after Jim Henson's passing, so much that it resulted in him and Disney parting ways. Whitmire, who had replaced Jim Henson as Kermit after his passing, specifically had a problem with the episode Little Green Lie, with this episode being his breaking point with Disney. The show was officially cancelled in May 2016, with poor ratings being deemed as the reason for this. The fallout of this show would result in Steve Whitmire being let go by Disney in October of 2016. However, the news of this wasn't released to the public until July 2017. It was said that Whitmire acted in a way that was toxic within the work environment, and this is why he was let go. With Whitmire being let go, Matt Vogel took over the role of Kermit the Frog from him. However, Disney letting go of Whitmire not only meant that Kermit had to be replaced, it also meant that specific Whitmire characters also had to be shelved as well, such as the icon of our lifetime, Rizzo. From this point forward, it seemed as though Disney had fully abandoned the Muppets. Disney had given them 3 chances during the 2010s, and 2 of them were considered to be flops, so they were once again shelved and deemed to be irrelevant.
Piggy, I don't think Kermit Jr. is doing so well.
Kill me! I'm in constant pain!
After the cancellation of the Muppets TV show that aired on ABC in 2016, Disney had appeared to lose all hope in the Muppets, not seeing them as a viable franchise or the cash cow that they once did, so they were once again, as they were in the early 2000s, shelved. It was incredibly obvious that Disney didn't see the Muppets as a sensible investment. Despite the fact that the Muppets do have a very dedicated cult-like following, it appeared that the Muppets were a real hit or miss with the general audience. It was also incredibly evident that this idea that the Muppets had been a bad business investment for Disney resulted in them having absolutely no idea how to market or push the Muppets. The Muppets' first big appearance since the cancellation of their ABC show was in 2020 with Muppets Now, which was a Disney Plus show that seen the Muppets trying to put on a virtual show during COVID. There were many celebrity guests including Seth Rogen and of course RuPaul.
That's dumb. You should kill yourself.
Between the ABC show and Muppets Now, there was a 4-year gap, which meant there was 4 years without any Muppet projects. However, you're going to be so shocked when I tell you this, but this show was cancelled after 1 season, just like the ABC show was. The next Muppet project to be released after this would be Muppets Haunted Mansion in 2021, which was based on the Haunted Mansion ride in Disney World. Disney would then give the Muppets another series after the cancellation of Muppets Now. This was of course Muppets Mayhem, which was released in 2023, which focused on the Electric Mayhem characters. However, this, like the ABC show and Muppets Now before it, was cancelled after 1 season. The cancellation of Muppets Mayhem specifically upset fans, as it did have a cult-like viewership, and also began a very interesting conversation, that being the fact that Disney very clearly didn't have any faith in the Muppets, and also the fact that they kept cancelling these shows after 1 season for not being smash hits meant that they weren't given a fighting chance to develop an audience. If you think about other TV shows, I think of like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, or even a show like The Office, their first season is often regarded as being one of the worst amongst fans. The first season of a TV show usually serves as the showrunners and the writers trying to figure out what works for them and what's funny and what works for the characters, and trying to find their identity within the TV world. However, these Muppet shows weren't even given the chance to even figure that out because they were all cancelled after 1 season. And it was a continuous theme as well. It started in 2016 and it continued into 2023. So Disney very clearly, as I've said, had absolutely no faith in the Muppets. This sparked a big controversy amongst Muppet fans during this time on social media, with them criticising Disney and their treatment and blatant disrespect of this legendary franchise. Now, one of the main criticisms brought up by Muppet fans during this time was in fact Disney's inability to put Muppets into media that would suit them and their humour. Disney is of course a very family friendly cookie cutter studio, with their movies being more enjoyed by children for the most part. Although adults can enjoy them, maybe some adults enjoy them a bit too much, they're mostly for children. They're not made with adults in mind, they're mostly made with children and families in mind because it's a family friendly studio. However, the Muppets historically don't really fit into this category of being family friendly. The Muppets were never created to be for children. In fact, Jim Henson specifically, as we discussed earlier in the video, wanted the Muppets to feel more mature in comparison to Sesame Street, which was targeted at children, with the Muppets' humour stemming from clever gags, pop culture references, adult humour, and also a level of self-awareness that children's shows don't usually have. And this isn't to say that kids couldn't and didn't enjoy the Muppets, of course they did. However, it wasn't specifically targeted at them. Disney, after acquiring the Muppets in 2004, have put the Muppets into a more family-friendly box, with Muppets Now being a great example of this. However, the 2011 movie could also be put into this box as well, with even Frank Oz describing this movie as safe for the Muppets. However, to be fair, they did try to put the Muppets into a more mature environment with the ABC show, and because this wasn't a huge hit with audiences, it's as if they decided to put them back into the child-friendly box instead of keeping them in a more adult environment, which they probably should have, to be honest. So I don't know what about the Muppets screams family-friendly to Disney, but they're not meant to be for children. They're meant to be for adults and maybe like young adults as well, maybe teenagers, but they're not for children. And I think that that's Disney's problem. They don't know how to market them. They don't know if they want to market the Muppets to a more mature audience or if they want to market them in a more family-friendly way. They don't know how they want to market them, and that was one of the big critiques that was brought up during this time. One of the other critiques brought up by fans during this time was the fact that Kermit the Frog's voice was drastically different from what it was before. Now, Matt Vogel is an incredibly talented performer and puppeteer. However, it cannot be denied that he sounds absolutely nothing like Kermit the Frog. I do think that he's very good at performing as Kermit. Kermit's facial expressions and body language and the way that he moves and stuff is so spot on, but he just doesn't sound anything like Steve Whitmire, and he doesn't sound anything like Jim Henson. He doesn't sound like Kermit the Frog. But again, this was a really big critique brought up by fans during this time. Another critique brought up by fans during this time was the fact that since the ABC show was cancelled in 2016, all the Muppet shows that aired after this had been cancelled after 1 season. Now, Muppet fans began to bring up these critiques on social media platforms such as TikTok and Twitter, or X, or whatever the hell it's called. Fans began to demand that Disney stop putting the Muppets into TV shows in situations that weren't right for them and didn't suit their comedy, and also called for Disney to stop cancelling the shows after 1 season, not giving these shows and the Muppets a fighting chance to develop an audience the way that other TV shows do. This went from a small amount of fans critiquing Disney for this to absolute outrage, with this outrage being brought on by the news that broke hearts and spirits all around the goddamn world. January 2025, the day of pain and the day of suffering. Disney officially announced that the beloved Muppet Courtyard would be closing down, along with Pizzerizzo and unfortunately Muppet Vision 3D. This would then be replaced with a Monsters Inc. land. I like Monsters Inc. as much as the next guy, right? I do. I love Mike Wazowski. He's a cool guy. However, I want to meet the bastard that asked for a Monsters Inc. land. Who cares about Monsters Inc. to the point where we need a whole land about it? We don't need that. What we need is the Muppet Courtyard back. What we need is a Muppet land. Michael Mouse needs to be stopped immediately.
I am untethered and I rage Outrage knows no bounds!
Now, this news was absolutely heartbreaking for Muppet fans because not only was this the closure of one of the last projects that Jim Henson worked on before his passing, it also symbolised Disney's attitude towards the Muppets and almost seemed to signal that they were turning their backs on the Muppets yet again. To fans, it came across as though this was Disney's way of saying that they no longer cared about the Muppets and deemed them to be, yet again, irrelevant. However, to combat the upset of the Muppet Courtyard closing down, Disney announced that they would be remodelling the Rock and Roller Coaster with the Muppets being the theme of this. Despite Disney trying to soften the blow, it didn't help at all as fans were still incredibly outraged as they argued that this ride was incredibly short and they believed it wasn't going to incorporate the Muppets in a satisfying way and in turn wasn't a good enough trade-off for Muppet Vision 3D. Fans were so outraged by this that they actually began a petition to stop this from happening. However, despite fans' best efforts, the Muppet Courtyard and Muppet Vision 3D closed on the 8th of June 2025.
Sir, there's a reporter here to see you.
Is it Kermit the Frog when he's wearing a trench coat? That tells you he's a reporter.
It does seem that the Muppet fans who have been vocal on their outrage at the mistreatment of the Muppets may have actually gotten through to Disney. Over the last year since the closure of Muppet Vision 3D, Disney has made some decisions regarding the Muppets that have given me as well as other Muppet fans hope that they haven't completely given up on the Muppets after all. 2025 marked the anniversary of the Muppets and Disney began promotional events to celebrate this, such as highlighting one Muppet a week. As well as this, a huge amount of Muppet merch was produced and released in a bunch of different shops, from clothing to pins to plushies, whatever you could think of, the Muppets were splashed over it. Now, the big move that Disney has made in regards to the Muppets is of course bringing back the Muppet Show. They actually listen to the fans for once. In September 2025, it was officially announced by Disney that they were working on a one-episode special of the Muppet Show that would serve as a pilot episode if Disney did agree to go forward with a full series. It was then reported that the special would be produced by Seth Rogen and would star the diva of the moment, Sabrina Carpenter. We as a society were truly blessed with the Muppet Show special episode being released on February 4th, 2026, airing on both Disney Plus as well as ABC. I'm going to give a brief review of the episode and just what I thought about it. Now, there will be some spoilers in it, kind of, right? So if you don't want to be spoiled of it at all, like, please go watch it yourself. I do recommend it. It was so good. So if you don't want any spoilers, then piss off. But if you don't care, then let's get into it. I thought the episode was absolutely amazing. The Muppets just work so incredibly well in a variety show environment. It is truly where they belong. I loved that most of the Muppet characters were given a real moment to shine. Despite the fact that the special was only 30 minutes long, it felt as though every main Muppet character was given at least a couple seconds to shine. For example, Fozzie Bearcat and Seth Rogen from the show was hilarious, and of course Gonzo's stunt not going to plan was iconic. However, my favourite part of the special was the fact that the Muppets that have been pushed to the sidelines while the Muppets have been under Disney were finally given their moment to shine, specifically Rolf, Pepe and of course Rizzo. Now, I also love Sabrina Carpenter in this as well. She was such an incredibly smart choice for a celebrity guest. Not only did she draw in viewers, of course, because she is having such a big moment right now, but she also has this very like silly tongue-in-cheek kind of humour that the Muppets also have. Sabrina and Miss Piggy's dynamic was so funny, and I loved the ongoing joke that Sabrina was copying Miss Piggy, with Miss Piggy threatening her with her loyals. The cameos from both Seth Rogen and Maya Rudolph were also incredibly well done and fitted nicely into the episode as well. One of my favourite moments was Seth Rogen commenting on the fact that a Muppet wasn't canon to the Muppet Cinematic Universe. Like, that genuinely made me giggle. That got like an actual like giggle to me. And another really big standout was of course Kermit the Frog. He shines so much in this episode, with him of course being the iconic straight man to the chaos around him. One of the big critiques of this that I've seen from fans online and stuff is of course the elephant in the room, Kermit's voice. As we discussed earlier in the video, Kermit's voice has been a bit of a controversial topic within the Muppet fandom. However, I'm not gonna lie, I actually didn't mind Kermit's voice at all. I actually think Matt Vogel's got a bit better at doing the Kermit voice. Matt Vogel is so incredibly talented. He's such a good performer as Kermit. He got Kermit's facial expressions and awkward movements spot on. Like, the way that Kermit's face would move whenever something was happening and he had to react was so incredibly spot on. He doesn't sound like Steve Whitmire and he doesn't sound like Jim Henson, but he does have the essence of Kermit's character, and that's, to me, more important than the voice, to be honest. I do think that with this special he has gotten a lot better with Kermit's voice than he has in the past. Like, I do think it is a lot better than what it was. I mean, that's just my opinion, of course. Like, you don't have to agree with me. And if you didn't like Kermit's performance, then that's absolutely fair enough. Like, I personally thought it was pretty good. Like, I wasn't that distracted by the voice. I think at first it was a bit distracting, but when you just kind of got into it and watched the episode, it wasn't that noticeable after a while. I mean, again, that's just my opinion, of course. Now, the only thing that did distract me a little bit was the laugh and cheer track. Now, of course, the original Muppet Show had both of these, and that's not actually why it distracted me. Like, I was fine with it, and I think it would have been weird if they weren't there, to be honest. The reason that it distracted me was because it is the exact same one that they used in iCarly. It actually made me laugh so much because it just reminded me of Gibby, and you know, and so that distracted me a little bit. Overall, I thought this was a great pilot, a great first episode, and I'm begging and praying that Disney picks it up for a full series. Please, 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 Disney. Come on, Michael Mouse, you have to do it. Now, with the news that's came out about the Muppet Show and how well it's done, that wish may actually come true. The Muppet Show special was incredibly successful. It debuted with 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, being certified fresh with 23 reviews, and it's currently sitting with a 98% rating from both fans and critics on Rotten Tomatoes. Your faves could never. The Muppets also trended on Disney Plus's homepage in a variety of different countries and had 8 million viewers between Disney Plus and ABC, which it also aired on. Disney also revealed that the Muppet franchise overall on Disney Plus, including all the movies and TV shows, have gained a total watch time of 125 million hours. Absolutely iconic. The success of the new Muppet special, along with the news that Disney will be getting a new CEO who is apparently a fan of the Muppets, gives me hope that Disney will finally stop being so goddamn rude and so goddamn annoying and will actually give the Muppets a proper chance to thrive. But time will only tell. Michael Mouse, you have been warned. You better not let me down, or I swear to God I will slap you silly. However, and I hate to be ants at a picnic and like ruin this lovely moment of us celebrating the success of the Muppets, but I do need to say this. The fact that it is only a special and it's not a full series shows that Disney is still a bit hesitant to fully believe in the Muppets the way that they should. However, the fact that we as fans all showed up for the Muppets and made this special successful may actually result in the Muppets getting a full series, which would be absolutely incredible. Now, I honestly hope that this special brings the Muppets back into the forefront of everyone's minds the way that the 2011 movie did, and that Disney doesn't fully give up on the Muppets again. Now, Disney have also done a variety of other things with the Muppets during this time and are planning on doing other things with them in the future. One of the other main things that they've done with the Muppets in recent times was bringing the Muppets to Broadway, partnering with Rob Blake to do so. However, the Muppets were only guests within this show, which was described as a magic show performed by Rob Blake featuring the Muppets. The Muppets were basically sidelined, which is absolutely outrageous, to be honest, right? This show was met with mostly negative reviews, to be honest, with most people not understanding the point of this collaboration at all, and also asking the question that we're all kind of thinking, like, who the hell is Rob Blake? Like, I don't know who this is. Like, I'm also not American, so maybe like he's really famous in America, but a lot of the reviews I read were like really confused about who the hell Rob Blake was. Now, the show ran from October 28th until November 16th, 2025, which isn't an incredibly long run on Broadway, to be honest, but it's still better than nothing, I suppose. Anyway, although this was a bit random, it shows that Disney is still willing to put faith in the Muppets. However, it again also highlights the fact that they clearly don't understand why people love the Muppets, or what exactly works for the Muppet characters, and how to adapt them into media that showcases why everyone loves them. Like, they just don't know what to do with them, basically. Like, Disney just are very clueless. You know, and if they brought the Muppets to Broadway and just made it like a Muppet show, I genuinely think people would honestly sell it out. I think it would do incredibly well. Now, as well as bringing the Muppet Show back, Disney is also allowing the Muppets to go back onto the big screen, specifically Miss Piggy. There isn't much known at the time of me writing this script for this video about this movie, but both Jennifer Lawrence and Emma Stone have both been attached to this project. It's unknown at this time if any other Muppets will feature in this movie. I'm guessing that they will at least make a cameo. I can't imagine them just making a Miss Piggy movie and that's it. I feel like they will incorporate some of the other Muppets in there. Now, there's also a couple of other things that Disney has done to either promote the Muppets or to add to the Muppet cinematic universe, if you will. One of those things being, of course, Miss Piggy being arrested at Sabrina Carpenter's concert. In November 2025, Sabrina Carpenter concluded her last ever show of her short and sweet tour in LA. During Sabrina's shows, she has many iconic segments, however one of the most popular is her Juno arrest. Before she performs the song Juno, she will select someone from the audience to arrest. Now, this is often a fan, however sometimes Sabrina will arrest celebrities who attend the show. Now, you may be wondering why I'm telling you this. Well, my good sir, this is because Miss Piggy was the final Juno arrest of the tour, and she appeared alongside Bobo the Bear. Now, this went absolutely crazy on social media, especially TikTok, and was a great way to not only promote the Muppets, but also to set up the connection between Sabrina Carpenter and the Muppets ahead of the Muppet Show revival. Disney has also brought back retired characters from the Muppets, including fan favourite Rizzo the Rat and of course Bean Bunny. Now, this news has resulted in the fans showing their excitement on social media, which has helped to promote the Muppets further. Rizzo was famously performed originally by Steve Whitmire and was retired when Whitmire was let go from Disney, breaking fans' hearts all around the world. However, despite the fact that Rizzo is back, he will not be performed by Whitmire, and of course Rizzo was given his own segment within the Muppet Show special. Now, I think that all the things that Disney has been doing recently with the Muppet franchise, including the Muppet Show special, the reintroduction of characters in the Miss Piggy movie, just to name a few, shows that Disney is at least listening to the fans a little bit and is trying to highlight the Muppets again, as well as it does show that Disney hasn't completely lost faith in the Muppets and that they're still willing to give them a chance, which is great news for Muppet fans.
You know, without the other guy yapping in my ear, these guys aren't half bad.
In conclusion, I personally think that Disney's mistreatment and blatant disrespect of the Muppets is absolutely disgraceful and unforgivable. As I said, Michael Mouse has a lot to answer for. However, it does seem as though Disney is trying to make up for what they've done and is actually listening to the fans regarding the Muppets. And for the first time in a really long time, I actually have a bit of hope that Disney is going to give the Muppets a proper chance, the chance that they deserve, because the Muppets are truly a godsend to our society.
Oh, I like that. That's nice. That's a warm family moment.
I agree. We can all learn something from that.
Waka waka. Who wants to hear a funny-ass joke?